let's talk about completing table 1. So table 1, as it says here, predicted results of enzyme function experiment. And we've got treatments 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, treatments 1, 2, 3, and 4 are already predetermined. We're going to be using lactose in each one. Here we're going to, for the enzyme, we're going to use the regular lactate. In test tube, fermentation tube number 2, we'll be using the boiled lactate, and then regular lactate in 3 and 4. Notice in every single one of your test tubes you have to have yeast. And we have to have the yeast in every test tube because that's our indicator. You have to keep the indicator constant because that's going to be telling you whether there's CO2 gas being produced, if there's glucose present. So notice that this is blank and this is blank as far as pH is concerned, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix the lactose, the lactate, and the yeast, and then I'm going to use pH paper to test the pH. And then I'll record the pH for test tubes, or fermentation tubes, I should say, 1 and 2, here and here. Now, for treatments 3 and 4, we're going to be altering the pH. So you can see here, pH of 2, here, pH of 12. And this is where I'm going to be using my acid and my base. So the acid that we're going to be using is hydrochloric acid. It's in a dropper bottle. And what I'll be doing is I'll be dropping about 2 or 3 drops at a time, mixing it into the solution, and then testing with the pH paper until I get down to a pH of 2. I'll be doing a similar thing with sodium hydroxide. So sodium hydroxide is a very strong base. It's about a pH of 14. I want to bring the pH up to about a 12. So again, I'm going to mix the lactose, the lactate, and the yeast, and then I'm going to be dropping 2 or 3 drops at a time the sodium hydroxide, and I'll keep testing until I make sure that I'm at a pH of 12. And this is the pH paper that we're using. The color that the paper turns indicates the pH of the solution. Now, we want to set up our positive control and our negative control. So the idea is, what can I put into a fermentation tube so that I know I'm going to get a reaction? And that's why one of the supplies that are out at the lab station is glucose. So if I definitely want a yes, I'm going to put glucose as my sugar. Now, if I already have the glucose, do I need an enzyme? I don't. So notice where it says enzyme or control. So in this case, as a control, I'm just going to use water. Now, how about a negative control? What can I put into my test tube with my yeast so that I know I'm not going to get a reaction? Well, one of our assumptions is that your yeast cannot consume lactose, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to put lactose in there, but I'm not going to use any enzyme, because if you don't have the enzyme, then the lactose should not be broken down, right? And we shouldn't get glucose. So I'm just going to use water here as well. All right, so when we look at our predicted results, and again, I'm going to have to test the pH on both of those positive and negative controls. Your predicted results are going to be, do you think, if you have treatment number 1 with lactose, lactate, and yeast, yes or no, do you think you're going to get CO2 produced? So you are going to complete data table 1 for what you think the predicted results are. Now, one of the things I do want to mention is that the amounts are up here. We're always consistently using 4 mLs of sugar. We're going to use 2 mLs of the enzyme or the control in this case, which is going to be water. And we're always using 10 mLs of yeast because we want to be consistent with the volume. The volume in each tube is always going to be 16 mLs total. So we're going to use 4 mLs of glucose here with 2 mLs of water and 10 mLs of yeast. Here we're going to do 4 mLs of lactose, 2 mLs of water, and 10 mLs of yeast. And of course I have to test the pHs for these, but I will share a photo of I'll take a picture of the data table once I've recorded the pHs so that you can add that to your predicted results. So right now looking at the data table, the way these treatments are set up, I want you to predict, yes or no, are we going to get carbon dioxide produced in these test tubes, all 6? Yes or no?